Welcome back, episode 2 here. Play to the settings, hopefully the sound's a little bit better. Now because I missed it last time, I'm going to go ahead and get the spaceplane hangar out of the way. Much the same stuff to see here. Kerbals that have no idea what the hell they're doing, etc, etc. And maybe we'll get to that in the future, but not for a little while. I want to go straight to the fun. They already have a bunch of pre-built spaceships that you can play with. Super Heavy Lander, as the name would suggest, it's for visiting other planets. So it would suggest that it could actually get to another planet. Space Station Core, that's new. They added that in, I guess, to introduce you to space stations, etc. The Orbiter, Kerbal. Ion-powered. I guess they have some new parts for you to play with, and they've already built a pre-made spaceship for you to play without, a 2-stage lander. That'll get you to the moon and back if you do everything right. Everything going well. You can see that I saved a series of tasks every time that I went and changed something major. I would go ahead and update it to the next version, hopefully improving as I go. You can see test 1 had 39 parts. That was basically just me trying to get to the atmosphere. I took a jump in, both feet approach. See if I couldn't figure it out for myself, and if your brain works that way, I suggest it too, because it really teaches you a lot about how the game's physics come into play, how adding a whole bunch of weight can work against you. For instance, test 3, I'll go ahead and show you. These are optional. You can add these in as you go to help hold you up. It's pretty long. Test 3 has a bunch of fuel tanks, some fins to help stabilize it and keep it upright as we go into space. RCS modules and thrusters. You can see I already had the space station modules in mind. See the docking collars that we saw before, the space pod, if you want to call it that. It's basically a bucket that you throw Kerbals in. Lots of RCS thrusters because I did have balance in mind for maneuvering in space, but also to be able to have the individual thrusters for both the space station itself. Once, see, these guys are separators. These are the parts that you dump as you go. So you get up into the atmosphere, or out of the atmosphere more likely, you would dump this whole half of dead weight. And there's another engine. You can't see it because it's tucked in behind it, but there's another engine in there for smaller fuel tanks, etc. to keep you going. So you dump the extra weight, and then there's the space station itself, and that has an engine on it. I remember seeing that before. I was mentioning that. And the pods and the RCS thruster fuel pack. It's very modular, very, very modular. And I love the music too. It's like The Sims in space. But you've got your RCS fuel tanks, that's your, these are called RCS modules or RCS thrusters. I forget what RCS stands for, but basically those are your maneuvering thrusters. And you've got giant tanks for actual main power thrusters. This one here is huge. Consumes a lot of fuel, but it got this ship all the way up into space. And this one actually probably gets into the upper atmosphere a lot faster than my later ship here, test number 5. Here's test 5. See a lot of changes between 3 and 5. Test 4 is more of a sad story. Lots of boosters, and you see that they have separators on them as well. These little structures here, they're to get the rocket pods up and out of the way, and also give it some space to separate, so those will peel off. Now this one actually struggles to get off the ground, and I'll show you here in a minute just what I mean. So you can see that that's how the design evolved. More fins to help keep all that weight stable. See, the fins are moved up because I just had no place to put them down below. see, bringing those fins brings a lot of extra weight up in space too, because there's our separator still. It's still there. And that means that once we get up into space, they don't really seem to do much, or at least you wouldn't think they would in the vacuum of space. But I mentioned earlier that it still kind of does. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's the fins, or if it's based on this pod, but you can still kind of rotate in space even if you don't have RCS thrusters or fuel for the RCS thrusters. I'll give you a contrast. I'll go ahead and do 3 and try to launch that up into space, and you'll see what I mean. It looks more promising at first, but it just kind of, it fails. So you can see I use that launch button at the top. That's really why having the button, or having the ability to click it from the space layout. Look at that thing. It's like a big floppy space sausage. It's ridiculous. So we'll go ahead and throttle up here and preload the motors. So I have it set up, and this is one of the things that's so important. This is one of the reasons that this didn't work out so well, is I actually have to, you hit spacebar to launch each stage. These are your stages. So once I hit spacebar, watch. Yeah, that must have been what I changed in stage 4. Yeah, but my dudes are still alive. Screaming their asses off, but still alive. Go ahead, end flight, and restart. See if it works this time. The game always takes a minute to load at first. Kind of choppy. That's why I waited a little minute for it to get ready. So I'm going to try to throttle up, and I'm hoping to go through these stages pretty quick. Okay, so now I'm going to switch these, drag them up to stage 3. Fewer stages, should be less complicated. And you know what, while I'm in here, I have an engine here. The engine's here, because that's where it stops glowing. Just to let you know, hey, this is where the engine is, and what's underneath it. Just to kind of give you a visual representation, because it's covered by this collar. Once this separates, this actually kind of, I don't know, explodes, disappears. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that down. Let's see, alright, so that. You can see how I had too much faith in this one. I was hoping not to have to lose this until I got all the way up in space, but I'm going to give you a review of everything I've done since getting into space. So the engine's here. So that'll break away. I'll bring the engine separate. So that'll break away. No, I won't be able to use that. Probably had it in the right spot. So yeah. So now I have them set that this will break away and this engine will activate at the same time. And then when I'm up into space, go to stage 2, where that'll break off. All the engines will break off. Hopefully by then all I'll need is the thrusters. And then once I establish a stable orbit that I like, I'll break off that space module, that station module. And then my upper portion here will make it back into the atmosphere, hopefully, and deploy parachutes. So I'm going to go ahead and resave that because I didn't really change anything, just the order. And in the next episode we'll launch.